Imagine you're having like a legal issue with your local government.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe, they made some decision that like really affects you and you feel like you've been wronged.
Yeah.
But what if the only court you could turn to for help was controlled by that same government?
Oh, wow.
That's the situation that people in China faced until pretty recently.
Oh, interesting.
So we're diving deep into how this reform called trans-regional jurisdiction, or TRJ, shook things up.
Okay.
We're using this really in-depth academic paper from the Journal of Public Economics.
It's a really fascinating look into how China's legal system works.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something called administrative litigation,
Okay.
which is basically how citizens can challenge the actions of the government.
Okay, so before we get into the reform itself,
Sure.
can you give us a little context on how things worked before TRJ?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know China's government structure plays a role here.
Right. So China's court system mirrors the government structure. You've got like national, provincial, and then down to prefectural and county levels.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, the courts haven't been truly independent,
Yeah.
with the Communist Party having a lot of influence.
Right.
So before TRJ, if you had a problem with, say, County A,
Okay.
you had to file your lawsuit in County A's court,
Got it.
which of course was under County A's thumb.
Yeah.
Not exactly impartial.
Yeah, that sounds like an uphill battle from the start.
Yeah.
So enter TRJ in 2014.
Right.
What was the core idea behind this reform?
Well, the goal was pretty simple, but clever, I think.
Okay.
Basically separate the origin of the issue
Okay.
from where it gets judged.
Got it.
So your hypothetical case against County A
Mm-hmm.
would now be heard in a different county's court,
Okay.
still within the same prefecture,
Okay.
but at least with a little distance from those directly involved.
So not a complete overhaul of the system,
Right.
but kind of a strategic tweak to try and level the playing field a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And the researchers were able to really dig into the effects
Right.
because of how TRJ was rolled out, right?
Exactly.
It wasn't implemented everywhere at once.
No, it was a staggered rollout.
Okay.
And that let them do this thing called a difference in differences analysis using, real court documents,
Got it.
essentially tracking what happened before and after TRJ in different places to really see the true impact.
And what did they find?
Well-
Was this just like a cosmetic change, or did it actually lead to different outcomes in court?
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Governments became 3.9 percentage points more likely to lose cases after TRJ was implemented
Mm.
in an area.
Okay.
Might not sound huge,
Yeah.
but statistically it's a very significant jump.
Okay.
It suggests that the reform had some real teeth.
Wow. So it wasn't just a symbolic gesture. No,
Yeah.
It sounds like people actually had a better chance of winning against the government after TRJ.
Yeah.
But did it affect everyone equally? Well,
Or were there differences based on who was suing
right.
or which part of the government was being
Yeah.
sued?
Yeah, those are exactly the questions that the researchers dug into. And the findings kind of reveal some fascinating nuances.
Okay, like what?
For example, the effect was much stronger
Okay.
when people were suing powerful county departments,
Mm-hmm.
like, the police, land management, or health officials,
Okay.
compared to suing, the entire county government as a whole.
Mm. That makes you wonder
Yeah.
if higher level officials still had ways to kind of influence things,
Right.
even with the cases being heard in different counties.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like the reform cut off some, but not all of the
Right.
strings that might have been influencing those courts before.
That's a great way to put it.
And when they looked at who was bringing the lawsuits,
Mm-hmm.
it turns out individuals benefited more than companies did.
That's right.
So TRJ was especially helpful for like the average person going up against the government.
Rather than big businesses who
Yeah.
might already have, more resources and legal clout.
Precisely.
Okay.
It suggests that the reform helped to level the playing field a bit
Yeah.
and gave individuals a stronger voice against, potentially overreaching government actions.
That's a pretty compelling argument for how even small institutional changes
Yeah.
can have a real impact on people's lives.
Absolutely.
But did this change in the courts
Mhm.
lead to any changes in people's behavior?
Yeah.
Did they become more likely to sue the government,
Well,
knowing that they had a better chance of winning?
that's another key finding, actually.
Okay.
The reform actually led to more people taking legal action against the government.
Huh.
It seems like TRJ gave people more confidence that the system could work for them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you feel like the deck is stacked against you,
Right.
why bother even trying?
Exactly.
But if you see, other people winning cases, that
Yeah.
could be encouraging.
For sure.
But wouldn't a flood of new lawsuits
Yeah.
also kind of put a strain on the court system itself?
Yeah, potentially.
Did the researchers look into any potential downsides
Yeah, he did.
of this increased litigation?
Absolutely. And they found that
Okay.
while the reform seemed to improve the quality of the decisions being made,
Okay.
it also led to longer trial times.
Oh, okay.
Likely because, the courts just had more cases on their hands.
Right. More cases, more work for the courts.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, there's a bit of a trade-off there.
Okay.
Increased access to justice, but potentially at the cost of some delays.
Right. So speaking of those court documents,
Yeah.
how do we know we're seeing the full picture?
Right.
What if certain cases,
Mhm.
especially ones where the government lost,
Yeah.
were less likely to be made public?
That's a very valid concern.
Yeah.
And the researchers were aware of the potential for biased data.
Okay.
So to address this, they used this really interesting statistical method
Go.
to estimate how many judgments might be missing from public records.
Okay.
It's actually based on a technique developed during World War II.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
What does World War II have to do with Chinese court documents?
It's more about the statistical principle behind it.
Okay.
During the war, the Allies wanted to figure out how many tanks the Germans were producing,
Okay.
but they only had the serial numbers of the tanks they'd captured.
Got it.
By looking at the gaps in those numbers,
Mm-hmm.
they could estimate the total number of tanks produced.
Okay, so I'm seeing the connection now.
Yeah.
They applied that same logic to the court documents.
Exactly.
Looking for gaps in, the serial numbers.
Yeah.
To see if there were signs of missing judgments.
Exactly.
Clever. And what did their analysis reveal?
Well, it suggests that
Sure.
while there might be some selective disclosure going on,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't seem to be driving the main findings.
Okay.
In fact, when they focused on courts with higher levels of transparency, the impact of the reform was even stronger.
Okay, so we can be reasonably confident
Yeah.
that this reform actually did lead to more government losses in court.
Right.
That it wasn't just a result of,
Yeah.
data manipulation or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But if citizens were winning more cases,
Right.
shouldn't they be more satisfied with the government?
You would think.
Did the researchers look into how TRJ affected public perceptions?
They did. And
Oh.
this is where things get a little paradoxical.
Okay.
I think more wins would equal happier citizens.
Yeah.
But they actually found that public satisfaction with local government decreased after the reform.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
That seems counterintuitive.
it is. Yeah.
Why would people be less happy
Yeah.
if they were getting better results in court?
It's a puzzle, but the researchers have a theory.
Well, let's hear it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. More illegal wins, but less public satisfaction.
It is kind of a head scratcher.
Yeah, so what's the theory here?
Well, the researchers think it might be a short-term effect.
Okay.
They were looking at just a few years after TRJ was implemented.
Right.
And they speculate that, by making it easier to sue,
Yeah.
the reform might have, accidentally
Yep.
shined a spotlight on just how much government misbehavior was happening.
Oh, so maybe it's kind of like ignorance is bliss situation.
Yeah, exactly.
People were happier when they just didn't realize how
Yeah.
often the government was messing up.
Exactly.
But once those issues were brought to light through all these lawsuits,
Yeah.
even if those suits were successful,
Mm-hmm.
it could still lead to a sense of disillusionment.
Absolutely. Suddenly realizing your house needs way more repairs than you thought.
Yeah, okay.
Finding a good contractor is great,
Right.
but it doesn't change the fact that you've got a lot of work to do.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So more lawsuits, even the successful ones,
Right.
could make people more aware of problems and
Mhm.
maybe temporarily decrease their satisfaction,
Mhm.
even if the system's actually working better for them in the long run.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there any evidence to support this idea
Yeah.
that people were becoming more aware of these issues?
There is, actually.
Oh.
The study found that after the reform,
Okay.
there was a noticeable increase in people searching online for terms like
Okay.
judicial reform and administrative litigation.
Oh, interesting.
They used data from Baidu, which is basically the Chinese equivalent of Google.
So people were actively looking for information
Yeah.
about their legal rights and options.
Exactly.
That suggests a heightened awareness of these issues,
Right.
which could explain the dip in satisfaction,
Yeah.
even as more people were winning your cases.
It's kind of like that saying, sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is an oncoming train.
Oh, yeah.
You're making progress, but it can feel overwhelming at times.
That's a very poetic way to put it.
Well, thank you.
And it highlights the challenges of
Yeah.
increasing transparency and accountability.
It's a process.
Yeah,
And it can be, messy and uncomfortable at times,
right.
especially in the beginning.
Okay, so we're starting to see like
Yeah.
a clearer picture of how
Mhm.
this reform kind of rippled through the system.
Yeah.
But let's go back to those specific findings for a moment.
Sure.
You mentioned that the impact of TRJ varied
Right.
depending on which part of the government was being sued.
Yes.
Can we unpack that a little more?
Absolutely, yeah. The study broke it down by the type of defendant.
Okay.
So was it, the entire county government,
Okay.
a smaller, sub-county government,
Right.
or specific departments within those governments?
That's a smart way to analyze it.
Yeah.
Because those different levels likely have
Yeah.
varying degrees of power and influence.
Right, exactly.
So what did they find?
Well, when it came to suing the entire county government,
Yeah.
the effect of the reform was pretty small,
Okay.
almost negligible, actually.
Yeah.
But then when they looked at those
Okay.
smaller sub-county governments,
Yeah.
the likelihood of them losing, jumped up significantly.
That makes sense.
This-
Those lower level governments probably had less clout
Right,
to exert influence on a court in a different county.
exactly.
It seems like the reform was most effective
Yeah.
at curbing the power of those smaller players.
Yeah, I think so.
But what about those specific departments?
Yeah.
Which ones felt the heat the most?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The most significant effects were seen in cases against
Okay.
the police and public security bureaus,
Mm-hmm.
health and birth control,
Okay.
and land and real estate departments.
The departments that often have the most direct interactions with citizens
Exactly.
and where the potential for abuse of power might be higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Were there any insights into why those particular departments?
Seemed to be most affected by the reform.
Well, it seems like before TRJ,
Okay.
those departments might have been more shielded by the, local power structure.
Mm-hmm.
But with the cases being heard elsewhere,
Right.
that protection was weakened.
Yeah.
And that gave citizens a better chance of holding those officials accountable.
That's a big win for the idea that even in a system where power is, concentrated,
Mm-hmm.
strategic changes to the rules can make a difference.
Absolutely.
But I'm also wondering about the courts themselves.
Sure.
If all these extra lawsuits were being filed,
Yeah.
did it bog down the system at all?
Right.
Did it affect the
Yeah.
efficiency or quality of the judgments?
That's a crucial question. And they did look into that.
Okay.
They looked at two things.
Okay.
How often judgments were appealed after TRJ
Okay.
and how long trials were taking.
So those are good indicators of whether the
Yeah.
reform led to hasty decisions.
Or just, clogged up the courts.
Exactly.
What'd they find?
Well, interestingly, they found that
Okay.
judgments were actually less likely to be appealed after TRJ.
Huh.
And if a judgment was appealed,
Okay.
it was less likely to be overturned by a higher court.
So it's not just that more people were winning cases,
Right.
but the decisions themselves
Yeah.
seem to have been fairer and more accurate.
Yeah, it seems that way.
That's pretty impressive.
It is, yeah.
It suggests the reform didn't, lower the bar for justice,
Right.
but might have actually improved the quality of decision-making.
Yeah, perhaps because those judges felt less pressure
Right.
from local officials.
Oh, okay, that's reassuring.
Yeah.
But what about the speed of the system?
Well,
Did all these extra lawsuits lead to, longer wait times?
unfortunately, yes, the study did find that
Oops.
trial times increased after the reform,
Okay.
likely due to the, higher caseload.
More demand, same amount of resources.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense, but overall it sounds like
Yeah,
TRJ was a net positive for China's justice system.
I think so, yeah.
More people willing to sue, more fair outcomes.
Right.
But at the cost of some efficiency.
Yeah.
We also talked about how the researchers used that,
Mhm.
clever German tank model
Right?
to check for missing data.
Yes.
Did they do anything else
They did.
to make sure their findings were solid?
They did. They took a close look at two different sources
Okay.
that reported on government losing rates,
Okay.
official court documents,
Mhm.
and separate work reports that local courts submit.
Okay.
They wanted to see if there were any discrepancies
Okay.
that might suggest data manipulation.
So it's like double checking their work
Yeah,
against a different set of records.
exactly. And they found that any differences between the two sources were basically random.
Okay.
There was no pattern suggesting
Right.
that courts were trying to hide judgments where the government lost.
Okay, so that adds another layer of confidence.
Yeah.
That the increase in government losses we're seeing is real and not just a result of,
Yeah,
selective reporting.
exactly.
But it still leaves us with that
Yeah,
puzzle of that decreased public satisfaction.
it does.
If the data is reliable
Right.
and the reform seems to have improved the system,
Mm-hmm.
why were people less happy?
Well, remember, it's all about perceptions.
Right.
Even if the system is objectively fairer,
Yeah.
if people are suddenly more aware of,
Right.
government misbehavior,
Mm-hmm.
it can lead to a sense of, disappointment or even anger.
Yeah.
It's like discovering a crack in the foundation of your house.
Okay.
You might be glad you found it so you could fix it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't change the fact that there's a problem.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So maybe the key takeaway here is that
Mhm.
transparency and accountability
Right.
are ongoing processes. TRJ might have been a step in the right direction,
Yeah.
but it also revealed,
Yeah.
the need for
Mm-hmm.
further reforms and improvements.
Precisely. And this kind of brings us to a broader question.
Okay.
Did this increased scrutiny from citizens actually change the way local governments operated?
Ooh.
Did they start behaving better to avoid being sued?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, yeah.
Did the researchers find any evidence
Yeah.
to suggest that the government
Well,
changed its behavior in response to TRJ?
they did look into this.
Oh.
They analyzed official government work reports,
Okay.
those, yearly statements,
Right.
where local leaders outline their priorities and plans
Yeah.
to see if there were any shifts after TRJ was implemented.
So they were looking for clues
Yeah.
in the government's own rhetoric.
Exactly.
What did they find?
Well, they found a noticeable increase
Okay.
in the number of references to, rule of law, Constitution, and similar terms after TRJ was introduced.
So at least on the surface,
Right.
it seems like the government was,
Yeah.
paying more attention to these concepts.
Right.
But did that translate into
Right.
actual changes in behavior?
Well, that's harder to measure definitively.
Yeah.
But they did find one interesting piece of evidence.
What's that?
TRJ didn't seem to have any effect
Okay.
on the amount of what they call misused public funds.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Essentially, instances where government money was misappropriated.
Okay. So that suggests that the reform
Yeah.
wasn't like a magic bullet
Right.
that wiped out corruption overnight.
No, not at all.
But does that mean
Well,
it had no impact on government behavior at all?
not necessarily.
Okay.
Remember, we're looking at a really complex system.
Yeah.
With many moving parts.
Right.
It's possible that TRJ had a more subtle,
Okay.
long-term impact.
Intriguing. How so?
Okay.
What kind of long-term effects might we expect to see?
Well, one theory is that
Okay.
if citizens are more empowered to challenge the government in court,
Mm-hmm.
it might create a deterrent effect,
Gotcha.
making officials think twice
Mhm.
before engaging in, blatant corruption.
So it's like kind of a
Yeah.
cat and mouse game.
Yeah, in a way.
So even if the government isn't completely cleaning up its act,
Right.
it might be becoming more cautious and strategic.
Exactly. It's a dynamic process.
Yeah.
And this is what makes studying legal reform so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about laws on paper.
Right.
It's about how those laws interact with, human
Yeah.
behavior, power dynamics,
Yeah.
and social norms.
It's a reminder that real change takes time
Absolutely.
and that we need to look beyond, simple cause and effect relationships
sure.
to understand the complexities of these issues.
Yeah, it's complicated.
But I'm also thinking about our listener
Yeah.
who might be feeling like a little overwhelmed by all this information.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
What are the key takeaways
Yeah.
we want them to walk away with so far?
Well, I think the main point is that
Yeah.
even in a system that seems very top-down, like China's,
Mm-hmm.
strategic changes can empower citizens
Okay.
and create more accountability.
Yeah.
TRJ is a great example of that.
And even if those changes don't lead to
Yeah.
Immediate widespread improvements in government behavior, they can still have a significant impact.
Absolutely.
By, raising awareness,
Yeah.
encouraging citizen participation,
For sure.
and shifting the balance of power, even if just slightly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. But we've only scratched the surface of this topic.
We have, yeah.
There's still so much more to explore. We need to consider, the potential long-term implications of TRJ.
Absolutely.
Like within China and beyond.
Yeah.
What lessons can other countries learn from this experiment?
Right.
And what does it tell us about the broader global struggle for judicial independence?
It's a big question.
In a world where authoritarianism seems to be on the rise.
Yeah, those are excellent questions.
Yeah.
And ones that we'll be diving into
Okay.
in the final part of this episode.
Okay, sounds good.
So stay with us, listener.
Yes, please do.
We're about to take this conversation global.
Welcome back to the show. We've been spending this deep dive talking about China's trans-regional jurisdiction reform,
All right.
exploring how this change to their legal system was designed to give citizens a fairer chance at suing the government. And we've seen some really interesting findings.
Yeah, definitely.
About the impact it had on court cases and government behavior.
Absolutely, even public perception.
Exactly, but it's also revealed some complex dynamics.
For sure.
More legal wins didn't necessarily lead to happier citizens.
No.
And while TRJ, was meant to strengthen judicial independence, it also led to those longer wait times for trials.
Longer trials.
So in this final part, let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
And think about the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
What does all of this mean? Not just for China, but for other countries who are grappling with similar issues.
It's a great question because, this study focused on China.
Right.
But it really sparks these broader conversations about the relationship between citizens, governments, and the courts, ensuring a fair and impartial justice system.
Right.
It's a universal challenge.
Yeah.
No matter what a country's political system is.
Right. Even in democracies, we see concerns about,
Absolutely.
political influence on the judiciary or, unequal access to justice.
Yeah.
Based on wealth or social status.
Right.
So what can other countries learn from China's experiment with TRJ?
I think one of the most important lessons is that structural changes to the legal system can have a real impact.
Okay.
TRJ wasn't about rewriting laws.
Right.
It was about changing the playing field a little.
Got it.
Making it harder for local officials to sway court decisions.
Kind of like moving a game from a biased home field to a neutral stadium where everyone has a fair chance.
I like that.
And the fact that it had such a noticeable effect, even in China's system, suggests that maybe similar reforms might be worth exploring elsewhere.
It's worth considering.
But, of course, not every country can just, copy and paste China's model.
Right. Exactly.
Each legal and political context is unique.
Absolutely.
So it's more about understanding the core principles behind TRJ.
Right.
And then finding creative ways to apply them in different settings.
Yeah.
What else should policymakers be thinking about if they're considering, similar reforms?
I think the study's findings about increased litigation and decreased public satisfaction, those offer valuable insights.
Okay.
That surge in lawsuits shows that, you need to be prepared for a jump in demand for justice.
Right.
So if you make it easier for people to sue, you need to make sure that the courts have the resources to handle those cases effectively.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, you risk, creating a backlog that undermines the whole system.
It's like expanding a highway without adding more lanes.
Exactly.
You might make it easier to get on.
Right.
But you're also more likely to get stuck in traffic.
Exactly. A good analogy.
And then that dip in public satisfaction, even though it seems kind of counterintuitive, it really highlights the importance of managing expectations.
Yeah, it's a process. Transparency can be Yeah, a double-edged sword.
For sure.
Exposing, government misconduct is crucial for change.
Absolutely.
But it can also lead to temporary disillusionment.
It's like finding out that your favorite childhood hero had some serious flaws.
Yeah.
Takes the shine off a bit.
But as we discussed earlier, that initial discomfort can be like a necessary part of progress.
Absolutely.
It's about facing the reality of those flaws so you can start to, address them.
Exactly.
So for governments that are, looking to increase accountability and transparency.
The takeaway is be prepared for the long game.
Okay.
It's not just about changing laws.
Right.
It's about building a system that can handle increased scrutiny.
Okay.
And being upfront with citizens.
Yeah.
And explaining that, real change takes time.
Okay. So much to consider here.
A lot to think about. But as we wrap up this deep dive, what's that one big thought-provoking idea?
Oh, that's a good question.
We want to leave our listener with.
For me, what's most striking is that this all happened in China.
Right.
A country that we often associate with, tight state control.
Right.
And, limited individual rights. Mm-hmm. The fact that this reform took place and had a tangible impact suggests that even in those seemingly rigid systems, change is possible.
It is a powerful reminder that the pursuit of justice and accountability, it's a global effort.
It is.
And that innovative solutions can come from, unexpected places.
For sure.
So as you navigate your own world, listener, keep an eye out for those glimmers of change, those moments where individuals and institutions are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Yeah. And don't be afraid to, ask tough questions, challenge those assumptions, and demand better.
For sure.
Because building a more just and equitable world requires all of us to be, engaged, informed, and willing to dive deep into these complex issues.
It's a team effort.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Until next time, stay curious.
Yes.
And keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
And remember, the world is just brimming with fascinating complexities just waiting to be uncovered.
That's right.
So, grab your metaphorical scuba gear and dive in.
Happy exploring.